The following is a short feature for the character Dennis Bateman. I asked the player what would he like the people to see about his character, and the player responded by saying he wished for everyone to start seeing how Dennis Bateman got started, where he came from, an origin, if you will. So I created a personal scenario for the player, for his character, that he responded to, very similar to how we do the main series. And I made use of his character's history and profile for what we know so far. And we got this, and I hope this isn't the last time we see Bateman's Chronicle. If you would like your character to have a feature, then continue to roleplay in our Discord server, and if someone nominates your roleplaying in the Room of Reflection, you could potentially get featured. For those with the meta pass, stay tuned for the meta behind this, as well as the thinning of the veil party. We see a pair of sleepy green eyes peering through rows of glass chess pieces. A young Dennis Bateman observes the complex arrangement of pawns, knights, and bishops, looking for the next best move. No matter how much Dennis studied, his strategy would always seem to crumble against his uncle. He loses focus just as a yawn comes rolling in, and the sunrise bleeds through the blinds and begins to soak his uncle's quaint living room in orange daylight. It reaches across Dennis's face, revealing to us a freshly bruised eye. Just then, a firm open hand whacks Dennis in the back of his head, blurring his vision momentarily. Standing beside him, we see a tall, lean, baby-faced Diliman man glaring down at him with an unsettling calm and a thin cigar clenched in between his black lipstick. Dennis turns around and looks up at him while crawling away in defense. Holding a medicine bag loosely in his grip, his uncle murmurs, "You missed another dose." He then looks over at the blinds, illuminated by the encroaching morning sun, then looks back at Dennis. "And you haven't slept enough." He plops the medicine back onto the glass chessboard, ruining the formation. "Take your medicine, Dennis." Dennis stands to his feet and retrieves his medication. His mutation awakened at a young age, and certainly not without complications, but the worst of it came in the form of a severe mental trauma caused by the first time he unintentionally went invisible. The feeling of being absolutely invisible for 3 days destroyed his equilibrium and put him through a bout of insanity. The medicine kept him centered in every aspect of the word. His uncle places his hand on Dennis's head and ruffles up his hair as he blows a thick cloud of smoke in Dennis's general direction. "It costs a lot of money to keep you healthy. Have some consideration." The two lock eyes. Dennis respected his uncle, and that was all. The relationship knew nothing of love, only survival. Or at least that's what Dennis believed. His uncle tilts Dennis's head to get a better look at his eye when he notices the bruise has worsened. He laughs. He playfully punches Dennis's shoulder and tells him that he'll never beat him in chess, especially with an exhausted brain. Dennis nods and begins to walk toward his cot. "Dennis," his uncle calls out, "I'm closing up early tonight. We're going to go to the Grand Cobble chess tournament at the park tonight." Dennis holds in his excitement with a smile, but was beside himself with joy. "For your birthday. I didn't forget, I just didn't get a chance to wish you happy birthday yesterday." Dennis doesn't bother to tell him that his birthday is actually today. He was too busy daydreaming about the fireworks and all the grand champions that he'll see tonight. Oh, and the cockatrice strudels? He was so hungry he could scarf down 100 of those. The medicine starts to kick in, and Dennis gets woozy. His uncle points sharply, "Go to bed." We cut to Dennis laying his head into his pillow with a great big smile. But soon he starts to think about all the other times his uncle was supposed to do something and didn't. But Dennis can't fight back the onset of fatigue, and so he rides the train of low hopes into a medicated slumber. Several plus hours pass and Dennis's eyes open wide as he leaps out of bed. He really wanted to believe this was happening, but would soon be brought to his knees by the crushing force of borderline starvation. His uncle owned a bar on the first floor of their home and so kept little to no food upstairs for his nephew. Dennis brushes it off and looks at the clock. His uncle should be home in just a few hours, giving him more than enough time to study his chess strategies. The further his uncle can get in the tournament, the longer they can remain on tournament grounds. The longer they can remain on tournament grounds, the more time Dennis has to pick pockets, lift jewelry, and steal food. His uncle told him just a few more biz quirks could get them out of the hell that they live in. And Dennis remembered this. Dennis was dedicated. Dennis waits on the sofa, focused and ready. 2 hours pass. Dennis peers out of the blinds. He doesn't see his uncle though. Just a man getting mugged beside his own car. He sits on the sofa and stares at a photo of his uncle and mother, whom were also twins in military uniforms. Dennis looks at the time. The tournament was starting in a half hour. He sits and waits a little bit longer. 2 more hours pass. The tournament has long since ended, and we see a saddened 12-year-old Dennis once again let down. He prepares to take his medication and call it a night, exhausted by anticipation, when just then he hears a loud crash from downstairs. Could the bar still be open at this time? Dennis puts his ear up to the door to get a good listen to the hall stairway when suddenly, barreling through the doorway into his uncle's apartment, come 2 rugged Dulliman thugs, dragging in with them an unconscious hostage. Dennis was familiar with the duo. They were his uncle's goons and were not very nice people. Every other week, they bring in a rival gang hostage for his uncle to strip apart. The big one with the greasy red mane was the worst of the two, though. He even laid hands on Dennis right in front of his uncle one time, and that was an eventful night. Like tonight will be, Dennis thinks to himself as his uncle walks in carrying a metal crate under his arm and locking up the door behind him with the other. The goons bind the hostage to their uncle's kitchen chair, the one they always use for these occasions, and it shows. Dennis and his uncle lock eyes. His uncle knew he let Dennis down, and Dennis knew his uncle couldn't give a damn. "Scram, kid," one of the goons shouts just as Dennis gets hemmed up and drug across the room. "Nothing's promised, Dennis, not even tomorrow," his uncle says, just before pushing him into the dark, cold bathroom. Feeling rebellious on his birthday, Dennis cracks the door back open and observes his uncle interrogating another victim. His uncle lifts the hood off of their hostage, revealing a Dulliman man with spiky red hair, and then pours a pan of hot boiling water on his lap, waking him in a discomforting fervor. The hostage looks around the room frantically, gathering his bearings. Once he realizes how dire his circumstances were, and these unfamiliar, forgettable faces, he grunts in frustration. "Oh, you fuckers, y'all are pathetic, you know that?" Dennis's uncle backhands the Dulliman, who continues, "You are out of your league. You will be hanging before daylight." The big goon hooks him and knocks a tooth out of his blood-gargling mouth. And that's when the hostage notices Dennis's uncle's torture tools being rolled over to him on a little table. The goons dismantle the metal crate that they mugged from their hostage, revealing a small weapons cache with the Mules und Steiner insignia on it. The Dulliman grinds his teeth and spits blood at his captors. "I won't tell you anything," or at least so he thought. Over a span of 10 minutes, we see Dennis's uncle using terrifying, inhumane, and unorthodox methods of interrogation, utilizing blades, pressure points, and some chemistry. It wasn't long before they learned that they have captured a Bateman tribe courier on his way back home with stolen property. The Bateman courier sits exhausted with the pressure-induced irregular heartbeat. Dennis's uncle asks him one last time to give him the stolen entry codes into the cache, or be subject to the godliest ranges of pain his body will ever experience. Dennis turns away. He knew what this meant. An IV can be seen being fed into the Bateman's neck. Pumping through his neck, down into his throat, was a gallon of contaminated nectar. With this contraption, at will, his uncle could induce mass mutation concentrated only on the nerves in the back of his throat, under his brain, which would deliver a feeling of pain that can only be described as a brain freeze that should kill you, but doesn't. Of course, the Bateman resists, having no idea what he was facing, and with one pump of that toxic Dorinthian soft drink, he begins squealing like a Nobblefrit while convulsing, eyes dilating and rolling back into his head. Suddenly, the whimpers cease. Dennis's ears perk up as he gets up to peek again. He sees his uncle and his goons hunched over their hostage, and soon they all begin to bicker over their fumble. They killed the hostage, and all chances of accessing the Mules and Steiner weapons cache. His uncle turns to Dennis's direction and sees him peeking through the door. Dennis, startled by his enraged glare, falls to the floor as the door slams all the way open, and as usual, after something goes wrong, his uncle was ready to direct that at Dennis. He always seemed to become another person during his bloodlust interrogations, and Dennis was always the victim in the end. He hops to his feet and stands up in defense. His uncle grabs Dennis by his hair. "You should have listened to me," and hurls him into the towel rack, tripping over the toilet and falling to the floor. Dennis begins to crawl backward, but his uncle grabs his ankle. Dennis was starving. Now his life was being threatened. Needless to say, his instincts kick in, and he stomps his uncle's eye in with the heel of his free leg, allowing him to break away. Suddenly, the entire living room behind him is illuminated by light coming from the windows. The goons shout in fear of Bateman tribe reinforcements, running toward the windows and taking cover behind them, calling for his uncle to come and regroup. His uncle, in a rage, leaps toward Dennis, but Dennis evades to the other corner of the small bathroom, turns invisible, then scurries out of the bathroom, barely evading his uncle's reach, blindly grasping at what he can't see. Dennis runs through the living room toward the front door, unseen but heard. He had planned fleeing for months, and now was a perfect time, but he was forgetting one thing. He stops, turns around, and spots his uncle's credit stick hanging out of his coat pocket and makes his way toward it, dashing. He gets his hands on it, but finds himself in the grasp of his one-eyed uncle once more. And suddenly, bullets come ripping through the living room, destroying the windows, walls, and everything in between. The goons hit the deck, and Dennis's uncle falls to the ground, grasping for breath, his body riddled with large holes, and his disembodied forearm still holding on to Dennis, who we see laying on the ground with him, unhurt. Dennis grabs a credit stick and flees toward the stairway. Dennis looks back one more time and sees a large humanoid silhouette heavily marching across the living room like an ironclad demon, with one large red eye that peered through the debris and gun smoke. The biggest goon points his shotgun and fires, but the clad Cyclops, unfazed by it, aims its heavy handgun at point-blank range from his face and blasts him away, his body hitting the floor like a meat bag. The other goon tries to run but trips over Dennis's dying uncle, choking on his blood. The large Cyclops power walks over to the goon, trampling over his uncle in the process, squashing his head like a melon, and skewers the goon with an energy blade that retracts from his arm gauntlets and then eviscerates him. The Cyclops then scans the dead Bateman tribesman, then surveys the living room looking for the Mules and Steiner cache, then swiftly retrieves it. It then marches back toward the hole in the wall, but before departing, the metal Cyclops turns and looks directly at an invisible Dennis Bateman. We cut to a close-up of Dennis Bateman's eyes, and in them, we see the glowing red cycloptic eye of Klaus Huron's helmet, the image forever burned in Dennis's memory as he stands frozen in fear, soon broken from it when Klaus ignites his jet boots and blasts off. Dennis, sweating, gathers his composure and flees down the stairwell through his uncle's bar and up the block. He runs and runs and runs, his traumatized psyche playing tricks on him, convinced that the Cyclops will have changed its mind and decide to come after him. Dennis soon realizes he left his medicine behind. Losing his breath, he stops and falls to his knees as it begins to pour rain. He was starving to death. What seemed like an entire block of running, he was only yards away from his home of hell. Strong-willed, Dennis gets back to his feet to push on, but is soon halted when suddenly facing 4 scary Dolomen from the renowned Bateman tribe, their pale jade-green eyes all fixed on Dennis, but not saying one word. Dennis gets ready to head in the other direction, but is soon kicked to the ground, then has a bag thrown over his head, and everything goes black.